I think the points that you brought out were extremely critical, whether it is to say that there is a need to leverage the existing funds of police modernization, whether it's the cyber security space that is needing to be important with safe communications, whether it's maritime security or counterinsurgency as a factor, whether it's disaster management or border management, and last of all, the need to have an agency that can essentially provide some sort of a guidance in ensuring visibility of what is visible but only at a state level often. So for example, I used to look at state police requirements at one point of time, and each state used to publish it in their own native language. So there wasn't a central platform where you could find consolidated requirements, but maybe there's a need for a platform like that. I think it's just the right time and opportune time to get Mr. Mediker's views on what should be the exact focus of this exercise going forward.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, Let me first thank IESA and the organizers for an excellent venue. I spoke at this similar conference seminar in Delhi, and I can tell you it was miserable weather. It's lovely weather in Bangalore. Thank you for inviting me. Rahul, I'll try to answer some of those questions, but before that, my colleague Pratap Eblikar has given us a framework within which internal security basically functions, the challenges, the problems. Brief introduction about my experience. I have been an IPS officer for 38 years, and I have done so-called legwork policing for a major part. I was in the Kerala cadre, so I have been a first responder. Then I have worked in intelligence, both in the state as well as with where Heblikar had worked in the RNAW, and then in the BSF, and I finally retired as the Director General of the National Security Guard, which is also known as the Black Cats. So I have seen first response, and I have seen what is called, the NSG by the way is what is technically known as the last intervention federal force. So they act in a different way, the police acts in a different way. Now the focus today is on, the title today is Critical Focus and Cohesive Collaboration. I think it's a very nice way to put it. We have a multitude of problems, as Pratap explained. We have the external problems coming in because of terrorism coming in from outside. We have our own internal insurgencies vis-a-vis the Maoists. We have the Nagaland problem, the Northeast states. Actually, what has happened today is the clear-cut distinction between external security and internal security are virtually becoming blurred. What is external security and what is internal security? Difficult to define today. You take Pathankot. Now, is it an internal security problem or was it an external security problem? You take 2611. Did we have a lapse in intelligence, or could we have stopped them before they reached our shores, which was again an external threat? These are questions which are difficult to answer. But let's not get into that technical part of it, and let's straight away get into what we should be doing and how we should be doing. Any situation today, security, relating to security, whether internal or external, has two dimensions. One is what the political executive has to do. The government of the day has to lay down a policy, taking large inputs from the diplomatic avenues and from intelligence, and then that has to be executed in some way or other. And it's this execution part which I will today try to focus, because that's where we need your help. One point I would like to make, I don't know how popular it will be in this audience, but my feedback is that somehow, for some reason, the corporate sector, the business sector, is not really concerned with security per se. They look at it as a return on investment. How much should I put in? Should I need 2 chowkidars, or should I put a surveillance camera, or what is my return? I don't think that's the right approach, because today's topic talks about cohesive collaboration. I say this because you look at the question of uh, monitoring by CCTVs. Today, the private sector has many more eyes on the streets than the government can ever hope to have. Take Bombay. I believe there are instructions that any shop, any business premise which has so many footfalls must install a CCTV camera. And that the recording, the access to the recording must be available to the police and the intelligence services. Now, this being so, I don't see why we should think of corporate and business as separate from government in this regard. Security is whose security? It's our security, your security, my security. Whether I'm a policeman or I'm a common citizen, our security concerns are the same. We are all threatened. The terrorist is not going to distinguish saying that, okay, oh, you belong to so-and-so private sector, I'm not going to touch you. No, he's going to just blow up a bomb, and then all of us are in it. So I would suggest that the corporate sector, if this is true, what I'm saying, this is my feedback, rather than look at it from the kind of thing of return of investment and a business proposition, look at it as from the black swan theory. See, one terrorist has to get lucky only once for all of us to be in trouble. He may not do anything for the next 10 years, but he has to get lucky once. And that's what the black swan, just requires one incident to prove the rule. So if you can look at it from that point of view and take it as an investment in yourselves, I think it will help everybody concerned to focus, to target, to even do business better. Having said that, let me come to 2-3 points, the general point before the more specific ones. We have as you said, we have the state police, which is mandated to look after internal security as far as policing is concerned, because policing by our constitution is a state subject. They are the first responders. They have crime, which they investigate. They have a duty to prevent crime by various means, surveillance, patrolling, keeping watch on criminals. That we all know. They also have a duty to feed central intelligence on local happenings. So they have a small intelligence unit also. So now their requirements are based on these mandates. You will find in the state police, for instance, there is an acute shortage of funds, and they may not want high-tech, expensive equipment, but they are in great need of 2-3 things. One is some automation of documentation. You have thousands and thousands of first information report, FIRs, registered. To access this at a time of requirement is extremely difficult. We have got computerization, yes. In Kerala state is quite good in that. We have got last 20 years data in the computers. But the ease of use, it's an ongoing thing. It's not as if you sit in an air-conditioned room. You are in a police station which is hot and sweaty, small, and something happens in your, you want to know whether anything like this happened in the past 5 years. I can tell you it's very difficult, despite all the computerization. Because the systems employed are so complex that the sub-inspector or the head constable is not able to operate it. So if you can come up with software that can handle this, it will be a great boon. Secondly, it is facial recognition. This is extremely more important today when we have to monitor large crowds at airports to scan for suspects. It's virtually impossible for a few constables and a few officers to look at a crowd and say, he's a suspect, he's a suspect. No, it's not possible. The list of suspects itself is so large. So facial recognition is the second one. And third area which I thought police requires immediate attention is modernization of their training methods. Now I'll tell you a very hard fact why our policing in India suffers. I did recently a project for the World Justice Program, and my paper was on why is it that by and large an IPS officer comes across better to the public vis-a-vis his dealings as a police officer then let's say a sub-inspector. I'm not saying sub-inspectors are bad or IPS officers. I'm just saying, by and large, that's the impression. The reason is that the IPS officer gets better training, more exposure. Because both are graduates, the qualifying requirement to become a sub-inspector of police is a graduate. The qualifying requirement to become an IPS officer is a graduate. And and they come from the same background. We all come from the same background. Why should he turn out to be better after a few years than the other guy? It's training. Now, why don't we train the sub-inspector? That's the next question. The problem, sirs, is that we are in acute shortage of manpower in this country of police. A good ratio, which we find, say, in the US or the Europe, is about 300 police officers to 100,000 population. In India, it is less than 100. And you can understand we cannot just make up this shortage overnight. It requires funds, it requires the capacity to absorb so many trainees, we require training institutions. So one of the things suggested is that use technology to push training to the trainee. Use technology to push training to the trainee, and this was part of our project. We have pushed certain amount of training in this project by way of using mobile phones to deliver training to any police officer of a particular rank, wherever he might be. Because we did another survey which shows that in Kerala at least 72% of the constabulary has smartphones. Most of them understand how to download an app and run it. So all that they required was a good training program which I can just push it to them. So they can use it whenever they're free. And by the way, a survey done as to the utility of this and how useful they found it, I can tell you one thing remarkable. 100% said we want this kind of training. So this is another area which training, which I think industry could address. What the training should be, what the content should be, yes, domain knowledge will come from the police. But the technology has to come from you guys. There's another component is the Central Armed Police Forces. Central Armed Police Forces are slightly different in the sense that they are not technically police forces as such. They used to be called Central Paramilitary Forces. Today they are called Central Armed Police Forces, CAPF. They are the BSF, which guards the Bangladesh and the Pakistan border. They also handle anti-Maoist operations. We have the CRPF, the Central Reserve Police Force, which is basically meant for law and order and security. It is, by the way, the largest such force in the world. It's, I think, touching 300,000 total. The BSF is about 2.2, and I think the CRPF is touching 300,000. Then you have the ITBP, which guards the Chinese border. We have the SSB, which patrols your Nepal, Bhutan, that border. We have CISF, which, as you know, does industrial security, guards our airports. And then you have something which is neither CAPF nor Army, is something like the NSG. The National Security Guard is a very unique force. It's headed by a civilian officer because it is a civilian contingency federal force. So hence the Director General has always been an IPS officer. But it has 50-50 component. We have 50% Army and 50% CAPFs and police. And some of the finest officers from the Army join the NSG. Some of the finest officers from the CAPF join the NSG. And that's why it's such a force to reckon with. Now coming to the third component of internal security, intelligence. Here is a massive requirement of technology. Massive requirement of technology. For obvious reasons, intelligence agencies will not reveal in very much detail in public what they really require. But on a one-to-one basis, on a contract basis, yes. Surveillance, video analysis and audit, covert and overt monitoring of people, of events, incident management or incident analysis. This is where big data analytics will come into play. Just take a small state like Kerala, the amount of data on crime and criminal available in the last 20 years is impossible to handle using even traditional computerized models. Because we are now looking for preemption of crime, not only preventing but preempt it. And for that we require to access systems like big data analytics. I have not found anybody coming up and saying, okay, in this area I can do it. You have American companies coming and telling us this can be done. Palantir, for instance, look at newspaper reports and then predict that Maoists will attack there or here or whatever. But Indian companies, we would like Indian companies to come up with this. For obvious reasons, Government of India would trust an Indian company in this regard, particularly where it relates to intelligence. Coming to the specifics of what is required, which are the areas? Take the Dhaka incident. You have all heard of what happened in Dhaka. They attacked a cafe and killed a lot of people, innocent people. Now, I have been talking to some officers on the other side as well as our own officers who were interacting with them. Had they monitored the previous 4 days videos, they had CCTV cameras. Perhaps they could have prevented this. Because it's obvious from the tapes that certain amount of coordinated action was happening outside the cafe. It is also very obvious from these recordings I saw is that the CCTV cameras once put were never cleaned, so because the faces are not clear, and never again monitored to see whether some tree is overhanging in between and blocking the view. But had somebody done this on a day-to-day basis, or at least a week-to-week basis, this could have been prevented and spotted. Incident analysis, for instance. Why is this man coming here every day and just standing in front of the cafe? Why is this lady walking up and down doing nothing? There's a video of that lady walking up and down every day for 1 week. She just walks this way and after 15 minutes walks this way. She's not doing anything. I mean, these kind of things could have been looked into and maybe the crime could have been prevented. Take the Pathankot incident. Forget about who is at fault. I'm not getting into that. When there is an intrusion in your border, shouldn't there be a system which sort of relays this, that there has been an infiltration? That's where it all broke down. Nobody told anybody because they thought the other guy already knew. Can we not re-engineer our processes using the technology available to send out these alerts to the required people and not overwhelm them with it? That's another problem. During the Commonwealth Games of 2010, it was in New Delhi, and we had a massive requirement for all sorts of security equipment. The Games Village was there, the stadia were there. And so, in the hurry-burry, everybody imported a lot of very fancy software and hardware for monitoring. They sent out alerts. These alerts were coming so often that the guy on duty just switched it off. I'm not joking. This, in our Indian conditions, they were not taken into consideration. For instance, the cow walks past. Kadang, it goes off. And it's not supposed to be there, the cow. Or a dust storm and a big piece of paper flying around, and the system would take off. It was happening so often that some of these fellows just used to switch it off, defeating the entire purpose of this monitoring. There is another area in which we are actually groping in the dark, I would say, and that is surveillance of all kinds, aerial borne, sensors. You take the Bangladesh border with India. I don't know how many of you have seen it. It's riverine, full of mosquitoes which give you PF malaria. You can die out of that. Hardly any roads. And then all that we talk about is let's fence it, let's fence it. See, the Pakistan border is 99% fenced. You can't do that on the Bangladesh border, by the way, which is a longer border, much longer border. You don't realize that because it's curved like that. The populations on both sides are so dense, they are virtually within handshaking distance. You can't put a fence at many places. In fact, there are houses which straddle the border. You enter into the living room, you're in India. You get out of the kitchen, you're in Bangladesh. I'm not joking, this is true. And nobody has been able to decide what to do about this. Both Bangladesh and India keep arguing about this. We'll take the border like this, we'll take the border. Now, by the way, you must know the fence is always put not on the border, because then the enemy can come up to the border and cut it. It's always kept in, say, 150 yards within your side. So there is land in front of the border of the fence which belongs to you. There are gates in between these fences to allow people to go and do agriculture on the other side. You'll find that in Meghalaya and all these places. Even on the Pakistan border, you'll find the same thing. Now that zone where you give access to your citizens to go across, there are two requirements. One is, what are they doing on the other side? Are they by any chance getting involved in drug smuggling or cattle smuggling or whatever? You have to keep a watch. These are not small borders, they are huge borders, thousands of miles. The other is, when they come back through the same gate, and they have got permits to go out and in, you have to check them, just like you do frisking in the airport. Now, you must understand that this is not the sophisticated crowd of an airport. It is basically rural folk, and they get fed up being monitored like this, physically frisked. We have a problem in the BSF where the ladies said, we will not allow male officers to frisk us, the farmers who go across. So we had to raise Mahila battalions, women battalions, just to do this duty. Can we not, to a certain extent, introduce technology to do this frisking for us? Can we not monitor the other side more effectively using sensors? In Bangladesh, can you have an electronic fence without a physical fence? Because there are some areas, I can tell you cannot fence. You cannot fence. We have a floating fence system being tested. It floats in the water. But it's extremely difficult to manage because it keeps getting pushed by the floods and the rivers and all that. So these are some of the issues. The other way we tackled it is using drones. We let loose the drones on the border and we can see both sides. But again, you have limitations of endurance with the smaller drones, and the bigger drones are exorbitantly costly. The ones which fly very high and have endurance of, say, 12 hours, 15 hours. And they are flown by specialized guys. The smaller drones which we can fly ourselves have endurance of 45 minutes, 1 hour maximum. The platforms we put on drones also require a closer look. Most of the time in Bangladesh is thick foliage, you can't see. Can we have infrared cameras on board, or something which can look through foliage, heat detectors, to see movement of people? They are these cattle smugglers. They take this cattle in. All cattle goes to West Bengal from all over India. They are in these big hearts. Then there is a guy who on the other side who has an agent here who will buy all this lot of cattle. And because it's illegal to export, what they will do is they have, I don't know what is the chemical, they will inject one bull with that. And this bull just starts running across the river. And with him follows the herd. Many of these cattle die. It's a very, very cruel thing. And most of them cross over. When they crossed over, they picked up at the Bangladeshi side. There are abattoirs on the other side, exclusively for slaughtering them and packaging and exporting them. Now, imagine a stampede of cattle, and then there is a fence. Half the time this fence gets damaged because of that. They cut the wire so that cattle can go through. Can we not have a system where maybe before they even come anywhere near, we are alerted? We cannot do it with human beings. Manually, it's becoming impossible. We require too much manpower. It's dark and the terrain is absolutely inhospitable. I can tell you, you cannot walk for more than 100 yards without getting totally fagged out. Lastly, we need much more technology to come in the area of cyber security. Now, this I would like to stress more on this when I talk. I don't know how many of you are aware, and most of you are aware, I'm sure, about the financial loss that data breaches across the world cost any government, not only us. There was a global study done by IBM and I think it's known as Ponemon Institute, IBM and Ponemon Institute. In 2015, the report came out. They looked at 11 countries, which include US, UK, Germany, Australia, France, Brazil, Japan, Italy, India, UAE, and Saudi Arabia and Canada. They found that the cost for one piece of confidential sensitive data breached has gone up from 145 USD per breach, for breach of one item, to today it stands at something like 155 USD. And the total increase in breaches, the total increase in cost because of breaches has gone up by as much as 23%. It stands somewhere at $5 million per year. That looks small when you look at ransomware, where medical records and confidential records are locked and the access is denied to the rightful patients, their privacy is invaded. The loss there is to the tune of I think it's $18 million in these 11 countries alone. Because the ransom is not counting the amount of ransom paid. It's to get over this. Imagine what can happen in India, where we are going so rapidly into bullet trains and into integrating our electric supply and train services, and somebody hacks this system. Are we prepared with our own software? Are we prepared with our own hardware to look into this? And mind you, this is a security concern. It is not entirely a concern of the railways or something like that, or banks. It's a security concern. The whole country can be brought to a standstill. Let's say I can hack the airports and all your ATCs are down. What will you do? Lastly, I would like just touch very, very briefly on participation in doing business with government, and that is where I think the crux lies. I know it is a very difficult process, but that's the way it is. As Chair mentioned, that it's much faster in the internal security space than in the defense forces for several reasons. It's not as if they are slow and we are fast. Their requirements are large, their requirements are required to be replicated. In times of war, you cannot have a situation where the fellow supplier says, sorry, we are on the other side, we can't supply you anything. So they have different problems. But three things I think are, but what I saw in NSG when I used to buy equipment from Indian vendors, they should be very well aware of. One is the quality. There has to be no compromise on quality. There has to be no compromise on after-sales service. But before all this, you must get it certified by certain agencies, depending on where you're selling it. You're selling it to the NSG or to the SPG, which protects the Prime Minister. It has to get clearance from DRDO and people like that. If you're buying bulk equipment, DGSNT. I talked about it last time only because I found many good products lost out, because after they had come to a conclusion with us, they found that they had not done this, or there was a foreign component in that which had not got cleared with a particular agency. If there's a foreign component in your device, a chip or whatever, you know that better, certain imported items are not allowed in the equipment. So if you are aware of these small requirements, I think doing business with government is not as difficult as it looks. I can tell you that in the NSG, and I was there from 2010 to 2012, we exceeded our budget by 20% every year. buying everything that we wanted. We had no grouse with government, and I never asked for any special favors from government. We just followed the system. I must say the vendors, both Indian and they very very cooperative. We had really sophisticated stuff and very expensive, proprietary items. So you cannot go for tender and stuff. With this, I will conclude, and I will now request Chair to give us an industry overview through Handu.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you so much.